All right, guys, welcome back to Tech Insights with Dylan White. Happy Monday. Hopefully, you guys had a great weekend. Today, we're going to kick off day 8 of our journey to the SC-900, and we're going to go through everything that has to do with Entra identity protection and Entra identity governance, two niche roles that I think are really good. If you're looking to get into the IAM space from doing something like help desk or desktop support administration, something where you've even been a cloud admin before and just looking for your next role. I think IAM, identity access management, is a great niche, especially in the security world or just in the engineering world in general. I think there's lots of roles that are coming from it. I think there's lots of job opportunities for it, lots of growth. So hopefully you guys learn a little bit here. Again, we're going to go through this and we're going to start the Microsoft Security Solutions module. So here we go. All right, guys, here we go. Let's get into it. I'll hide the share and let's go. All right, so in this module for the describing identity protection and governance capabilities of Entra, we're going to describe obviously Entra identity governance. We're going to describe privileged identity management, otherwise known as PIM, and then we're going to describe the capabilities of Entra identity protection. Okay, let's get to it. So what is Entra identity governance, right? It allows you to balance organizations' need for security and employee productivity with process and visibility, right? It allows you to govern identity lifecycle, access lifecycle, and privileged access administration, right? Complete for business partners, employees, right? It allows you to say which users should have access to which resources. Are those users, what are the users doing with the resources? Are the effective organization controls for managing access, and can auditors verify controls are working? Identity governance and access has come a long way over the last 5 or 6 years, and it helps organizations and management, right, of just-in-time access. Right, so identity lifecycle. What is an identity lifecycle, right? You need to, organizations want to join, move, and leave processes, right? So hiring, offboarding, right? Users then, maybe promotions, right? You move from one department to another, right? All that is part of an identity's lifecycle in an organization, right? So let's look at the diagram, right? So it starts with no access, right? Your first job role, you joined. Second job role, maybe you move, right? Move in a department, move, and then you retire, right? You leave. So what's that look like, right? So for many organizations, identity lifecycle is tied to the representation in the HR system, right? Such as Workday, Success Factors, there's all kinds of different ones out there, right? But the HR system is the authoritative source for the list of employees, right? With Entra P1 or P2 offers the integration to the HR system from a provision standpoint, right? So when a new employee is added to the HR system, Entra can create a corresponding user account automatically, right? Similar when the property such as a department or employment status change, right? Synchronization of that updates at Entra, right? Keeps consistency throughout, right? So with P1 or P2 also includes what's known as Microsoft Identity Manager, right? Which can import records from on-premises HR systems such as SAP, Oracle, right? For MIM, which is what's known as in the industry MIM, some people call it, has been around for decades. And PeopleSoft, right? Oracle PeopleSoft is one of the biggest HR platforms in the world, right? And so it really has allowed us to do a lot of automated provisioning for the industry. Right? So what is access lifecycle, right? That's the process of managing access throughout the user's organizational life, right? So from one point from they join to when they leave, right? Various stages in between, right? Organizations can automate access lifecycle through such as dynamic groups. It allows you to create attribute-based rules to determine membership, right? When the attributes of the device change, the system evaluates all dynamic properties in the directory to change any change that would trigger, right? Should they be removed from a group? So what is privileged access lifecycle? We'll talk about this in the diagram form, right? So you go from having no admin rights to your first admin role to your second admin role and leave IT. You can also layer these, right? So maybe you're an organizational only systems engineer. You have a global administrator access, and you also have user administrator, but you only want to use one role at a time, right? You want to use the role that's just needed to get that job done. So you have a multi-role. That's managing that privileged access. So let's dive into access reviews. Again, this is all would all be under the identity governance layer. Okay? So access reviews allow organizations to effectively manage group memberships, manage access to enterprise applications, and role assignment. Right? Regular access reviews ensure that only the right people have access to resources. So we look at this. Let's look at this in just some verbiage, right? Too many users in privilege roles, right? You should only have a limited amount of people that have a global administrator. You should have a limited amount of people that have access to each role, right? how to secure business critical data access, right? You should be checking that regularly. Right? To maintain a policies exception list, like who can we allow outside of main policies. Ask the group owners to confirm they still need guests in their group, right? Maybe they have a contractor group, and validate that every 30, 60 days, right? So make sure we validate it regularly, right? And that's what the next part is all about. Have reviews recur periodically, right? So manage user and guest access with access reviews, right? You can easily ensure guests have appropriate access, recertify, make guests come back in, etc. Right? You can have multi-stage access reviews. So if we look at this, right, you can say allows you and your organization to enable complex workflows, right, to meet recertification requirements, calling for multiple reviewers to test to access requirements, right? So you can have, maybe a team lead, maybe a department lead, etc. Right? And then this is kind of what that web page would look like. Very straightforward. It's made so that IT can create this stuff, but then users can actually leverage it. All right. So what is entitlement management? This is one of the probably more unused yet right now, but it allows identity governance feature that enables organizations to manage identity access lifecycle at scale. Users may not know what they have access to. They may have difficulty authenticating it, right? When users find or receive access to resources, they move on to access longer, right? External access allows you to delegate the creation of access packages to non-administrators, right? These access packages contain resources that users can request. The delegated access package manager then define policies, which users can request access, who must approve, blah, blah, blah. How to manage external, right? It uses access packages, so you can actually do, instead of just an access review, an access package could have maybe a whole role department, right? So maybe you have an accounting team with access to 7 different applications and 5 different teams, blah, blah, blah. All that could be in one access package, which an access package manager, right? So then that person could then approve that based on who's coming in, who's leaving, who's joining, etc. So then you have Entra terms of use, right? You can have a whole page of policies. Right? That's just the terms of use. So if I'm going to understand a few things in this, right? Entitlement management, it's why would I use it? And then the Entra terms of use, why would you present it, right? Very simple, straightforward. All right, so what is privileged identity management? Very important concept. Right? It's just in time, right? Providing privileged access only when needed. It's time bound, right? So if I need access today at 5 a.m., it needs to be, maybe I'm only allowed for 2 hours at a time because it's a very privileged role, right? It needs to be approval based. Somebody else needs to approve it. It needs to be visible, sending notifications, right? It needs to be audible. And why would you use it? It reduces the chance of a malicious actor getting access by minimizing the number of people who have access. Very simple. Right, what can you do? You can manage Entra roles, Azure roles, you can have groups. Right? The general workflow, if we look at this, you assign to member owners with a scope, with an assignment type and a duration. And you activate the role, right? Once you're eligible, you still have to activate, and you can see here, you can put the amount of time, right? You can have a custom activation start time, and then you can put the reason why, right? And then the approval, we'll get an approval to approve or deny, and the justification, etc. Right? You can extend, right? Then it's honorable. You can see it all in the logs. Very, very straightforward, but it's very powerful. And you should be using it. All right. So what is Entra identity protection? Right? A tool that allows organizations to accomplish automate the detection and mitigation of identity-based risks, investigate risks using data in the portal, and export risk detection to third-party utilities for further analysis, like a SIM tool, for instance. All right. Microsoft analyzes trillions of signals per day to identify potential threats. I think the last time I looked at that data, I want to say it was roughly 45 trillion events per day. That is ridiculous. Again, Microsoft security is probably the most analyzed data sources of the world, right? It's trillions. It's ridiculous. These signals are generated in Fed identity protection, right? Conditional access uses them, SIM uses them, right? So many different ways that we use them. So detect risks, it's calculated in real time or offline, right? Assigning risk represents the probability that a given authentication request isn't authorized. We talked about this yesterday. Assigning risk versus user risk, right? Maybe assigning risk will be an anonymous IP address, right? Maybe they're using an anonymous VPN, atypical travel, unfamiliar sign-in properties, right? A property would be, history to look for anomalous sign-ins, unfamiliar location, etc. Microsoft Entra threat intelligence, right? Threat intelligence detects sign-in activity unusual for the given user, right? A user risk, when we talked about this yesterday, two different things. Anomalous user activity, right? Risk detection baseline normal, right? Remember, we're always baselining this. Anomalous data is very important to know. User reported suspicious activity, right? The risk detection is reported by a user who denied an MFA prompt, right? Leaked credentials, and then again, threat intelligence, right? Only generate risk detections when correct credentials are used in an authentication request. And then how do we investigate risk, right? Risky users, risky sign-in, and risk detections. All different things that we look at, and we can see it all by the data, right? So the user has one risky users report when either both are true. So understand what each is, right? A risk detection is for everything. Risky sign-in is reported when there are one or more risk detections. A risky user has one or more risky sign-ins and one or more risk detections have been reported. How we remediate that? After you'll take action, right? So what some of the actions are, right? You can, require strong authentication, like make them do a MFA, make them do a secure password reset. All those are different ways of automated remediation, right? And then we can export that data into SIM tools, right? Different ways. Now, what about workload identities? What are our options? A workload identity is an identity that allows an application or service principal access to resources. They can't perform MFA. They often have no formal lifecycle process. They need to store their credentials or secrets somewhere. Very straightforward. What is permissions management? Okay, so permissions management, otherwise known as cloud infrastructure entitlement management, or CIEM, right? CM, people say all kinds of different things. Permissions for any identity and any resource in Azure, AWS, and GCP. Think about that. Entra now is allowing you to manage your permissions in AWS and Google Cloud, right? It helps organizations address zero trust principle of least privilege access across all the clouds, right? Organizations are increasingly adopting multi-cloud strategies, right? With proliferation of identities and cloud services, high-risk cloud permissions explodes, right? Security teams are under increased pressure to ensure access to keep the company productive, right? But it's inconsistent across the cloud. Right? So if you look at it, from permissions management, it detects and automatically right sizes and continuously monitors unused and excessive permissions. Permissions management helps organizations address requirements for the least access privilege, the discovery of the entire infrastructure, remediation that automatically right sizes for least privilege, continuously monitors. Right? So you can discover, right? You can do a cross-cloud permission discovery. You can do a permission creep index, right? You can do permission usage analytics, right? How are users using the permissions? Simple, right? Automated deletion of permissions for unused over the last 90 days, right? Keeps that down so those old accounts can't be accessed and used by malicious actors, right? Permissions on demand, right? You can monitor them just the same way, right? We can see it all in that portal, or we can export that into a SIM tool as well. The SIM tool does not have to be Microsoft Sentinel. We can export other SIMs. But I'm just going to say something, it should be Microsoft Sentinel. All right, so what is Entra Verified ID? This is probably one of the newer technologies. When GA this year, I went to a Microsoft engineering airlift, one of the coolest tools in the world. For those of you that are on LinkedIn, you might have saw the ability for you to verify your ID using your email. That's part of it. LinkedIn it subscribes to verified ID. Right, so in the digital world, transactions are increasingly done over the web, often requiring individuals to make claims or assertions that organizations can verify. Think about it, you have verified badges for your certifications. It's very similar. I say who I am and I can prove it because I have something. Right, so through LinkedIn, you're doing verified ID, saying you are, right? So I am Dylan White, and I can prove it because I'm Dylan White and working for this application. Right, we do it with our usually it's a work ID. Right, so how it works. So if you look at this, right, you have an issuer, right? You issue it to an individual, and then you present it to the verifier, right? So the issuer is an organization that attests to claims and grant digital signed credentials to user, right? An issuer can be an identity verification provider, a government agency, an employer, university, or any other organization, right? The user receives and approves the credential obtained from the issuer, stores and manages the credential in their digital wallet, presents it to the verifier. Right, so now in the Microsoft Authenticator, we can actually store our verified IDs. Very cool concept, because as you can see, the world is going to these digital IDs. Like there's some states here in the U.S. that now have a verified ID for their driver's license. Even it's crazy. The verifier is an organization that requests proof upon receipt and verifies the claims. Right, support its all its verifiable data registry. Right, the underlying verifiable data registry is a collection of systems involved in creating and recording metadata. Right, so there's a whole demo around it, but it's a very cool technology. I think it's going to go big places. I think it's going to be similar to kind of like a Crypto. Sorry, and how far it's come. All right, so let's get into the knowledge check for everything Entra protection and governance. All right, so organizations implement important changes in the customer-facing web app to ensure that any user that wishes to access these applications reads the legal disclaimer. Which feature it's going to be? Disclaimers are terms of use. Organizations is project-oriented with employees often working on one more project at a time. Which solution is best suited to manage user access to organization's resources? It's not going to be terms of use, not entity protection. It's going to be entitlement management. The organization has recently conducted a security audit and found that people who have left were still active inside global admin roles. Not good. Users have now been deleted by IT organizations as recommended, so to prevent similar security lapses happening in the future. Recommend privileged identity management. Your IT organization recently discovered that several user accounts in the finance department have been compromised. CEOs asked for a solution to reduce the impact of compromised user accounts. The IT team is looking at which Entra features, which one should they use. So, if you're looking at compromised user accounts, we're going to reduce the impact of compromised user accounts. To me, it's identity protection all the way. All right, your organization is looking for a solution that provides comprehensive visibility and control of permissions for any identity and any resource in your multi-vendor cloud environment. All right, we can stop right there. Remember what I told you a couple days ago? You read this, usually there's maybe 1 to 2. There's usually 2 right answers on every test. This practice in the module knowledge checks only have 3. Only there's only 1 right answer. So if we look at this, right, comprehensive visibility, is that identity protection, privileged identity management, or permissions management? Let's be honest. Multi-cloud is the key here. Multi-cloud is permissions management, right? Let's check it. Got nothing wrong. Love to see it. All right, let's get into the next one. So when we go back here, we look and see what we've done everything in the Entra identity protection and governance and capabilities. So now we've done that, we can go back and we can see that we've completed the entire section on everything Entra. We've looked at the function identity types. We've described authentication. We've described access. And now we've described protection and governance. Everything Entra, you know the basic concepts of it. So now we get to dive into the biggest meat and potatoes. What are the different security capabilities and security solutions? All right, so we're going to describe core infrastructure security services in Azure. That's all we're going to go through. That is a lot. It is probably, for those of you that are new to following me, Azure security is probably one of the toughest things because it's so broad and involves so much. For those of you else that know, I had got the cert, but it took me 6 tries. So for you, those of you that struggle to get certifications, keep with it. Just keep going. All right, so let's get into it. So in this module, we'll be able to tell you, you'll be able to understand the Azure security capabilities for network protection, how you can protect your virtual machines, and how to keep secrets safe with Azure Key Vault. So let's get into it. All right, what is Azure DDoS protection? For those of you that don't know what DDoS stands for, go back to the very beginning, start section 1, start the security 101, and learn a little bit of the basics. All right, DDoS stands for distributed denial of service. Okay, any company, large or small, can be the target of a serious network attack. Right, so distributed denial of service attacks. Right, the whole aim of them is to overwhelm resources on your applications and servers, making them unresponsive or slow for genuine users. Right? The 3 most frequent types of DDoS are volumetric, right, volume-based attacks that flood the network layer, protocol attacks, right, they render a target inaccessible by exhausting server resources. So think about this as you could do an RDP, right, DDoS, right? So you're removing any capability to use RDP across the network, right? Resource application layer attacks, right? They try to target web app. Okay. Now, what is Azure DDoS protection? It's designed to help you protect your applications and servers by analyzing network traffic, discarding anything that looks like a DDoS attack. So if we look at the diagram, you can see an attacker tries to hit the Azure backbone. DDoS protection, it protects all these different resources, right? So app gateway, load balancers, VPN, web apps, fabric, app service, and your whole VNet. Right? So anything that's behind the VNet will be protected. Right? So what's included, right, in Azure DDoS? And Azure DDoS is at the service layer of layer 3, right, and layer 4. So network and transport. Right? Key benefits are always on traffic monitoring, adaptive real-time tuning, and protection telemetry monitoring and alerting. Right? You can integrate it, right, with any SIM tool out there, including Microsoft Sentinel. Right? And Azure DDoS protection supports 2 tier types, right? IP protection and network protection. The tier is configured in the Azure portal when you configure Azure DDoS. Right? Network protection is as a SKU. It's combined with application design best practices, enhanced DDoS mitigation to defend. Right? It's automatically tuned to help protect your specific Azure resources and virtual network. Right? IP protection, right, is a pay per protected IP. So if you have 20 VMs, you pay per IP. Right? Most people I see out there are using DDoS as a network protection layer, right, to protect the whole VNet. Right. So next, let's dive into Azure Firewall. Right. So it's a managed cloud-based network security service that provides threat protection for your cloud workloads and resources running in Azure. Right. You can deploy the firewall on any network, but the best approach is to use a centralized VNet. Right. It's the best approach. Right. All the other virtual networks and on-prem networks then route through it. Right. So we look at the diagram. Right. You have multi-spoke, right? Spoken hub. You have your central VNet. Right. So the Azure Firewall then becomes, if we're talking in networking terms, again, go all the way back to Microsoft Security 101. You look at this like a DMZ. Your Azure Firewall becomes the DMZ for your resources in Azure. Right? Your on-premise hit that. Your Azure all goes through it. Azure Firewall is protecting it. What are the key features? Right? Built-in high availability and availability zones, networking application level filtering, outbound SNet, inbound DNet to communicate with internet resources. Let's talk about that real quick. It allows you to translate the private IP address and network resources to allow an Azure public IP address to identify and allow traffic originating from the virtual network to internet destinations. Right? Similarly, inbound internet traffic to the firewall public IP address is translated to the destination, right? Destination network address translation, right? Or source. Source and destination. That's SNet and VNet. Remember, source, destination. Simple. Multiple public IP addresses, right? It can all be associated. Threat intelligence, integration with Azure Monitor, right? Super important. Let's get to the next one. What is a web application firewall? You have Azure Firewall, web application firewall. Not confusing at all, right? Let's get into it. All right, web applications are increasingly targeted by malicious attacks that exploit commonly known vulnerabilities. Right? So we look at the diagram. Again, I'm a big diagram person, right? Web App Firewall provides centralized protection of your web applications from common exploits and vulnerabilities, right? Allows for patching known vulnerabilities in one place instead of securing each individual web app. If you look at this, again, the edge, you have users, attackers, bots, all these bad things coming in. Then you have global WAF policy, custom access control, sitting in front of Microsoft Global Network, right? Azure resources, public regions, you can put in front of your on-premises, on the cloud. Beautiful thing. Azure WAF has been adopted just as much as Azure Firewall. It's pretty big out there. All right, let's talk about network segmentation. One of the key features of Zero Trust when it comes to the networking pillar. Right? It's about dividing something into small pieces, of course. Right? It consists of small business groups, such as departments, etc. Right? From a corporate region, the ability to group related assets that are part of workload operations, isolation of resources, and governance policies. Right? Also, like I just said, Zero Trust, assume breach. Right? Helps you also for all those. Azure Virtual Network, right, is a fundamental building block of your private network in Azure, right? So a traditional network, they operate in your own data center, but it brings additional benefits, right? Enable organizations. How it does it? Create multiple VNets per region, per subscription, multiple spawning networks, subnets, right? That whole concept is still in Azure, still in cloud networking. VNets provide network level containment of resources and no traffic allowed across. VNets are inbound to the virtual network by default, right? You can make it allowable, but it's not allowed by default. It needs to be explicitly provisioned, right? This enables more control over how Azure resources and a VNet communicate with other Azure resources and the internet. Right? So we look at this, we have we have two different regions, right? We have one VNet in region 2, two VNets in region 1, right? Very straightforward. All right, what's network security groups? This is a very important concept to understand. Very important as you start learning more about cloud networking. Right? It lets you filter your network traffic to and from Azure resources in an Azure virtual network. Right? An NSG consists of rules that define how the traffic is filtered, You can associate only one NSG to each virtual network subnet and network interface in a virtual machine. Right? The same network security group, however, can be associated to as many different subnets and network interfaces as you choose. Right? In the highly simplified diagram that follow. Right? So if you look at this diagram, right, you can see it with two subnets, right, connected to the internet. Each subnet has a virtual machine. Right? So if we look at this, over internet layer, right, two different VMs, two different subnets, one network security group though. And it allows for inbound and outbound security rules. So think of it even before the firewall level, like you have centralized firewalls, you can still do similar rules in the NSG, right? So you have a unique name, you have to have priority set, source and destination, protocols, the direction, port ranges, and what the action is, right? So if you look at the diagram, walks you through it, right? So you have the priority level, right? So allow the virtual network inbound, right, on any port, any protocol, one virtual network to another. Right? It's allowed. Deny all, deny everything else. Straightforward. The most like a firewall rules. What's the difference? Right? The Azure Firewall Service complements network security group functionality to provide defense in depth, like layer defense, right? Better together, all that good stuff. Network security groups provide distributed network layer traffic, filtering to limit traffic to resources within virtual networks in each resource. Azure Firewall is fully stateful central network, right? Firewall as a service, network and application level across different subscriptions in virtual networks. Remember, NSG is one VNet, firewalls, everything. It can be one central firewall. Okay, what is Azure Bastion? Another really amazing service, which I think is incredible and only gotten better. It lets you assume your multiple VNets, right? It's a service you deploy that allows you to connect to a virtual machine using your browser, the Azure portal, right? Fully platform managed paths allows you to provision inside your network with RDP and SSH connectivity, right? So think of this: your multiple VMs, right? You have Azure Bastion sitting in the middle, right, with over one private IP address. So think of this: you can have RDP and SSH directly in the Azure portal, right? You can remote sessions, no public IP address required, no hassle, right? Protection against port scanning, hardening in one place, right? Provide against zero-day exploits, right? Cloud managed, right? So what's Azure Key Vault, right? Azure Key Vault provides against the following problems: secrets management, key management, certificate management, right? Centralized application secrets, right? You want to securely store secrets and keys, monitor who uses and how applications use your keys, simplifies administration. Okay? So you look at this, right? Administrator with Azure subscription vault key, URL to the developer, right? Logging to the security team. Okay, let's get into the knowledge check. All right, security admin has created the Azure network to filter traffic to virtual machine, while inbound traffic to RDP, but the default network rules currently blocking all inbound traffic does. So in other words, what does the security admin have to do to allow inbound? Create a new rule that has a higher priority. There's nothing to do. Always create a new rule, higher priority. Security admin wants to protect Azure resources from DDoS attack and needs logging, alerting, and telemetry, which Azure service can provide those capabilities. DDoS, default DDoS infrastructure protection, DDoS network protection, or Azure Bastion, alerting, logging, telemetry, and network protection. Organization has several VMs managing the security elements of what Azure Bastion gets secure access to those VMs. What should they keep in mind? The Azure Bastion is deployed per virtual network support per virtual network period, deployed per subscription, or per virtual machine. It's not per virtual machine. It's not per subscription, it's per network. How can application developers benefit from using Key Vault? To test and debug the application code, to register the application with Azure, to securely store and retrieve application secrets. So everything's about secrets. And remember, Key Vault, secrets, and credentials. All right, let's check answers. We're done. We got some more XP in our Microsoft Learn profile. All right. So once again, guys, that was day 8. We learned everything about Entra identity protection and governance, huge niche, and we started learning about Microsoft security solutions. We started diving into everything inside of Azure core infrastructure. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow, we're going to dive in, keep going through Microsoft security solutions. Again, this will be the very meat and potatoes of the security concepts. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. If you like the videos, please like and subscribe. See you guys tomorrow.